As the wedding music began to play, I watched in absolute horror as my father took my sister by the arm and started walking her down the aisle toward my groom. When I tried to step forward to stop this madness, my own mother grabbed my wrist with an iron grip and whispered for me not to make a scene. I stood there completely alone, feeling the betrayal crush my chest, until a mysterious older man stepped out from the back rows, causing my father to drop my sister's hand and turn completely pale. The morning of my wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but a strange tension had been lingering in our family home for weeks. I had spent over a year planning every single detail of the ceremony with my fiancé, David, hoping to finally feel the love and support from a family that always seemed to favor my younger sister, Chloe. Chloe had always been the golden child, receiving everything she ever desired, while I was left to build my own life from scratch. As I put on my bridal gown, I noticed my mother and Chloe whispering in the hallway, their eyes darting toward me with a mixture of guilt and hidden malice that I could not quite understand at the time. When we arrived at the church, the atmosphere grew even heavier as my father avoided looking me in the eye entirely. He spent all his time pacing near the entrance, checking his watch every few seconds, as if he were waiting for a signal or trying to delay the inevitable. I dismissed my anxiety as simple wedding jitters, trusting that my family would ultimately stand by me on this monumental day. David was already waiting at the altar, looking handsome and nervous, completely unaware of the storm that was about to break inside the chapel. The doors opened and the traditional wedding march began to echo through the high stone arches of the church. But instead of my father coming to guide me down the aisle, he walked right past my bridal holding room and extended his arm to Chloe, who was wearing a dress that looked shockingly close to a bridal gown itself. They began their slow march down the aisle together, leaving me standing near the back doors in absolute disbelief as the guests started whispering loudly in confusion. I felt a wave of humiliation washed over me, realization hitting me that my own family was attempting to replace me on my own wedding day. Before I could even voice my anger or take a step forward to confront them, my mother stepped out from the shadows of the foyer and gripped my arm tightly. Her fingers dug into my skin as she hissed into my ear, warning me not to make a scene and ruin Chloe's big moment. She told me that David actually loved Chloe all along, and that our family had decided this was the best way to handle the situation without causing a public scandal. My jaw dropped as I realized the depths of their betrayal, standing entirely alone while the people who raised me chose to sacrifice my happiness for my sister's greed. Just as my father and Chloe reached the halfway point of the aisle, a tall, distinguished older man in a tailored dark suit stood up from the rear pews. He stepped directly into the center of the aisle, blocking their path completely and forcing my father to halt in his tracks. The moment my father looked into the stranger's eyes, the color drained instantly from his face, and his hands began to tremble so violently that he dropped Chloe's arm entirely. The entire church fell into a deathly silence as the mysterious man pulled a thick leather folder from his jacket, holding it up for everyone to see. The stranger introduced himself as Thomas Vance, the primary executor of my late grandfather's massive estate, an inheritance that my parents had kept completely hidden from me for my entire adult life. Thomas looked directly at my trembling father and announced to the entire congregation that according to my grandfather's final will, the family estate and millions of dollars in trust funds would only be unlocked and distributed to me on the day of my wedding. My parents had realized that if I married David, I would gain full control of the wealth. So they had conspired to substitute Chloe at the altar to keep the money under their own control. David looked down from the altar, his face twisted in confusion and disgust, and he realized the trap my parents and Chloe had set, though he immediately stepped down to join my side. Thomas Vance explained that he'd been tracking my parents' financial fraud for months, and he chose this exact moment to expose them because their greed had finally driven them to commit the ultimate betrayal against their own blood. My father collapsed onto a nearby wooden pew, burying his face in his hands. while Chloe began to cry hysterically as the reality of their public ruin set in. The wedding did not happen the way my family planned, as David and I walked out of that church hand in hand, leaving the schemers to face the consequences of their actions. Within weeks, the legal documents provided by Thomas Vance stripped my parents of their home and assets, forcing them to face a criminal investigation for estate fraud. I learned that true family is built on loyalty and love rather than bloodlines. And as I look at my new life with David, I know that karma delivered the perfect justice to those who tried to steal my future.